Hello everyone. Today I'm gonna be featuring the Vermont. We were given access to this upcoming Tier 10 American battleship yesterday, and I basically spent most of the day yesterday playing this ship, testing it, and these are my first impressions after playing this ship for, well, roughly one day. It has given me some insight into how this ship works, and many of the problems that I feared are just as basically as cumbersome as I expected. What has been a pleasant surprise, and something that I will probably start with, is of course the guns. The Vermont has access to 12 457mm guns. This means it has the hardest hitting broadside in the game. And these guns have that classic is 15750 AP alpha, which means of course that if you manage to land any volleys in this ship, you hit like an absolute truck. I was of course worried because, well, everything else on the ship seems, First World War era. I mean, supposedly Tillman design and so forth. So I was honestly expecting the guns to also perform very poorly because of this. I was expecting old shells, old guns, basically some reason or some consistency in this. But that is actually not the case. As this Slava about to turn broadside is about to find out. The guns perform very well. I would say without a doubt this is the hardest hitting ship in the game right now, but it does come at its fair share of a cost, and that is of course the 40-second reload. Now I do want to highlight this quick chart which shows you how weird in fact the dispersion or the performance of these guns are, because normally when you shoot targets far away, the American shells tend to slow down quite a lot. Basically they lose penetration as they go. But the thing with these Vermont shells is that somehow Wargaming has tweaked like the air drag on these shells to such an extent that even though it starts kind of like losing the competition, at long range it just overtakes everyone. It starts below both the Montana and the Ohio in penetration, but once you go past, is it 13 kilometers or so, it actually overtakes them both. And in fact it does have the best shell travel speed of all of them, which of course gives it that punching power, especially at range. The 457 of course means that you also overmatch 30mm, so you can get some absolutely filthy volleys in. The first part of these gameplay clips are running the dispersion mod, and the second part will be running the reload mod. I've been testing them both, but especially running the dispersion mod, I've had some extremely filthy volleys. And I've been very pleasantly surprised with how good these guns are. In fact, the problem is of course the reload, like a Petro pushing out like this. If this Petro had faster reactions and would start reversing faster, he could easily get into cover before my massive 40-second reload could kick in. Luckily, he kind of overestimates the tankiness of his ship, and he sticks around for just long enough for this massive cumbersome 40-second reload to finish. And normally you see Petropavlovs get away with this stuff, but especially with the dispersion mod, the dispersion is all kinds of filthy and the alpha damage is all kinds of filthy, and it leads to things you don't really normally see in World of Warships. So gun performance, I would say absolutely top notch. Even with the long reload, if you do get to use these guns, they are almost always rewarding, especially running this dispersion mod. That's the good part. Basically everything else about this first impressions is gonna be the bad part. I'm sorry to tell you this. First of all, armor wise, it has a 32mm nose, no icebreaker, so standard basically Montana, Ohio nose in that sense. The upper belt is 38mm, very standard once again, but the deck armor is 51mm, which should theoretically give this ship more HE resistance, but in actuality I would say this ship is probably the single most vulnerable ship to any sort of HE. The reason is basically the entire population of Vermont living on this ship. In fact, if you just look at the amount of superstructure, 3 funnels and all that superstructure on this ship, you basically really can't miss it. It is very easy to target. The big nose and stern is also very easy to target, and of course because the ship is so dreadfully cumbersome, so dreadfully slow, it also means that, well, you're basically never gonna miss. When people miss this ship, it's because they take too much lead. Those are the times when people are missing me. Once they realize, oh my god, that's actually how slow that thing is, that's when they start hitting it. To put it into perspective, this ship does 24.2 knots. that's running the speed flag. In comparison, Yamato with the speed flag, who was before this, I think the slowest tier 10, does 28.4. So this one does 24.2. That's with the speed flag. In actuality, because the engine power is so dreadful, every time you make any sort of turn, any sort of maneuver, your speed drops basically below 19 knots. So in actuality, you're just crawling along. The guns kind of help alleviate this issue, as you can probably see. But overall, the handling of this ship is absolutely dreadful. The rudder shift is incredibly cumbersome as well. It's that American rudder shift. It's 19.1 seconds without the rudder mod, and honestly, I'm afraid to run the rudder mod because that means taking more fire damage. I'm tempted to do it just because the ship is so clumsy. The other aspect is the vaunted AA. The ship does have access to defensive AA, so you'd think, hey, maybe this thing can defend itself against carriers. I have 97% AA left at this point, so basically more than you can probably expect to actually have in a game, and a Zeppelin kind of just drops the Moskva right next to me and doesn't really care. In fact, you're gonna see a bunch of plane kills and then shooting down the fighter squadron. When it comes to actually killing these torpedo planes, it really does take dreadfully long, and this is with defensive AA active and reinforced sector, and against tier 8 planes that are considered basically some of the squishier ones in the game. So, no, the AA is not impressive, and no, you're not going to defend yourself. The other issue is the armor. While it technically is supposed to have better armor plating than the Montana, especially protecting the Citadel, I have noticed that because of the round shape of the ship, if you try to angle in and use your back turrets, well, as you can probably see there, you can get Citadel'd straight through. I think Yamato Citadel weakness. Basically, as someone in my chat said, you can't really angle a circle. And that's really the issue with the Vermont. It is so round that if you try to use your back turrets, even though the firing angles are very, very good, you do open yourself up vulnerable to just being penned, just being punished. This is a filthy volley, by the way. NC kind of has the same issue, and this guy's giving far too much broadside. And these are the situations where Vermont, of course, really gets to shine. From 65k to a solid, well, once both shells hit, 115k. So 50k volley on that poor North Carolina. Really underestimating the punching power of this ship. But what this all means then is, well, in terms of tankiness, you actually don't have any. And it gets even worse because your heal is actually quite dreadfully bad. You'd think I maybe used my heal prematurely when I just popped it. No, that's actually the amount of healing that you have in this ship. In fact, this heal with the healing flag heals you for 616 per second for 28 seconds. That is basically the same amount as Ohio's heal, which is 577 for 28. But the difference is Ohio's heal has half the cooldown, 40 seconds compared to the 80 seconds on this one. For some reason they decided that this ship did not deserve to have Montana's improved heal. Montana, of course, heal was fairly somewhat recently buffed to 762 per second over 28 seconds because they decided the Montana needs the survivability. Well, the Vermont needs it even more, but it has access to the old American heal, and my god does it struggle. It basically heals 4,000 less per heal, and when you got 5 heals, that's 20k of less healing. More than anything, I'd say this ship kind of needs, would really benefit from having the Ohio fast reloading heal more than anything, because the Vermont is a ship that ends up being horrendously reliant on your teammates. And I mean horrendously reliant, because if you need your team to basically survive on a flank. If your team collapses on a flank, you get overrun. I've tried to disengage from the flank when it starts collapsing with this dreadfully slow, clumsy, easily spottable 14.2 km concealment, no AA, no real way of defending itself, slow heal. Like, this thing just gets hunted down and burned down so very easily. I had a Thunder just hunt me down one game, and it was just a horrendous experience. Like, there was absolutely nothing I could do in that fight. I've tried to fight a DD, tried to chase down a DD. That was absolutely tragic. Like, normally when you fight against the DD in a battleship, you feel outmatched. When you fight against the DD in the Vermont, you just feel completely outclassed. Like, it's like you're fighting a carrier. That's how imbalanced it is. You have no chance in that engagement. So the secondaries are, of course, not too much to talk about, and this thing is basically a floating target. It's supposed to be tanky, but it's very much not so. It is incredibly squishy because of those. The citadel is significantly above the waterline, so if you try to brawl in this thing, you will most certainly be citadeled, and in general you eat far more damage than you'd expect, and that's because, well, look at the sheer amount of broadside, the sheer amount of freeboard that you have on this ship. Anytime you expose, well, not even broadside, you expect to get punished, and expect to get punished hard. In fact, you'll get a pretty good example here. I'm turning out because I want to shoot the Kurfürst, but then instead of shooting the Kurfürst, the midway pops up around the corner. So I decide, you know what, we're gonna angle out and we're gonna take a pot shot at the midway instead, because carriers are obviously a much bigger threat than Kurfürst can ever hope to be. Now, first of all, the turning circle 850. It's better than Montana's, but you turn so slowly that not that impressive. 26,000 damage from that angle. I don't know. Maybe I deserved it. Maybe it was too much broadside. I'm somewhat accepting of eating volleys like this. You get to see, of course, the AA in action with the Thunder helping me out here. But the problem is now we wait 40 seconds. And this is where the damage you eat starts getting a bit frustrating, because, well, he gives a fair bit of broadside, so I expect to get some good damage in on him. He shoots me and I angle away. You see how steeply I'm angled? That's still 11,000 damage. That's really it. And with the weaker healing and the inability to disengage, with the poor spotting, and the fact that you basically eat damage like crazy from everywhere, this thing just melts. I find the Montana to be significantly tankier. I find the Ohio to be much tankier than this thing. It is very much a slow-moving, I'd hate to call it glass cannon, but in terms of how easy it is to actually hunt down and just kill, it does very much feel like one. You have to be so dreadfully terrified of how you position in this thing. If you overextend even slightly in this thing, you instantly die. Like, the problem is you can't disengage in this thing. You can't turn around full broadside because the huge citadel means you just get deleted. You can't go undetected. You can't outrun the foe. Any sort of mispositioning in the ship is punished hard. And even if you don't misposition, if your team collapses, then you're also in trouble. And you might note, actually, I didn't mention it, but this game here, when I was moving up this flank, I was actually hoping to create a crossfire with my Thunder buddy there. But the problem is the Thunder was just following me. He was sailing behind me. And normally in a faster battleship, I could turn around, I could reposition somewhere else to create a crossfire with my last surviving battleship. But in this ship, he's so much faster than I am, and if he just sails behind me, I can never actually create a crossfire. So I'm so horrendously reliant on my teammate to understand to create the crossfire, that even if I try to do it myself, him just following me around ruins any plans I have for that crossfire. So I don't know, pleasantly, my first impressions of the Vermont are that I am pleasantly surprised by how well the guns perform. This is with the reload mode. The game earlier what it was with the dispersion mode. Honestly, I'm still not sure which one I prefer. I'm gonna be playing with both again today to try to figure it out. I think it might come up to choice. Running dispersion is great for those hard-hitting volleys, but 40-second reload is brutal. And then on the flip side, the tankiness is even worse than I feared. It's just worse than I feared. Well, that's the downside of the trolling of the battleship dispersion. Sometimes it just chooses to troll you. At this point, I'm trying to push in, trying to basically push in and get a crossfire, because I'm in Thunder, huge citadel. If I can just push up fast and get a crossfire on him, I can kill him. This was one of the earlier games in the Vermont where I kind of didn't just respect how brutally slow this thing is. Because, you know, I need to angle in as well. And you see, when even though I'm full speed, the fact that I'm forced to make these small maneuvers to angle to try to mitigate incoming damage, I'm doing 20 knots in actuality. I'm actually doing 20 knots. And with the 19-second rudder shift, I turned out to shoot, and now it takes me so long to turn in again to try to mitigate this damage. He's still shooting HE, so this actually kind of gives me some false sense of confidence that, hey, maybe this guy is going to keep shooting HE. And then that happens. That was, I think it looked like 26 km, but he shot it, I think, when he was 28 kilometers away. That Izumo just citadeled me from 28 kilometers. And that really highlights something else, and that is how easy this ship is to shoot. I tried to turn in to mitigate the AP, but the Thunder just loads AP and just citadels me out of the match. And here we go, the Izuma is laughing, he citadeled me from 28 kilometers, I think he said nice tier 10 or something like that. Basically very unimpressed with how easy the ship was to shoot at and how easy the ship was to punish. And this is really a common theme with the Vermont. If you're expecting to be a tanky brawler, a ship that can endure damage as you push in, you're nothing of the sort. You are very much more like a vulnerable fortress that has surprisingly good firepower. Still, I need to play this ship some more before I can make up my mind, but let me move on to my recommended build for the ship. Right, starting off, we of course have the equipment. Auxiliary armaments mod, keep your secondaries alive, because, well, I actually haven't had a turret knocked out once in any of the games, I think. So these things are very, very tanky indeed. Additional tankiness, because, well, there's not much else to run here. Faster turrets, once again, not a whole lot else to run. Don't even think about building for these secondaries. 21mm pen and 6-second reload, not exactly impressive. Additional tankiness, I think today I'm gonna test with the steering gears to maybe get like the rudder shift down just a bit. Because having the 19-second rudder shift down to 15.3, I'm not really sure how much this will help, but maybe the ship will be more comfortable to play. It does mean, of course, being an easier HE spam target. I'm not really sure how good of a trade that really is. Concealment system, and in this case I am running the reload, and I'm still really undecided. You get some absolutely filthy volleys with this artillery plotting room, because this thing has like 1.95 sigma, and with these 12 guns, if you can get pinpoint dispersion, you can get some disgusting volleys in. So I'm really torn on which one I want to be running. We'll see. I'll be testing both of them today once again, and basically trying to figure out. I don't think either is a bad choice, but which one I prefer is still kind of up in the air. Finally, a spotter plane instead of fighter, because the fighter plane is comedic relief. It doesn't actually do anything. Captain build wise, I'm running the standard battleship captain, with of course Halsey. Bit unfortunate that I haven't gotten hit hard because we're not getting any achievements on these test ships, because I would really love to see what the 20% main battery reload would do for a ship like Vermont. It could become quite a scary monster. But since we can't get achievements, I haven't been able to proc it. I still run it though for the expert loader and expert marksman, both which benefit battleship captains greatly. Standard battleship build, which is priority, adrenaline, superintendent, fire prevention, concealment expert, and then we go the standard, especially jack of all trades. Very important on this thing, because as mentioned, this thing has the worst heal of all the tier 10s. As you can see, 616 over 28 seconds, whereas Montana, of course with the flag, has a pretty meaty, oomphy 762. Same amount of heals, 5, provided he's got a captain with superintendent, and same cooldown as well on it. In fact, if you were to compare heals, the Vermont heal is actually closer in effectiveness to Ohio's heal. 616 per 28, and Ohio is 577 over 28. The difference is, of course, Ohio's heal has half the cooldown. So that really puts into perspective how little staying power you ultimately have in the Vermont. This thing just goes down surprisingly easily, and once people realize how easy this thing is to burn, I think it's gonna go down even faster. That remains to be seen though. This was my first impressions. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, thank you for the support, thank you for the subs. I'll talk to you guys next time.